I'm Stephanie Hansen. This is my Chapter 3, School as Public Institutions, for my ED 831 Social Foundations of Education. An overview of the chapter is basically where education was and how it became back in the time of slavery, and how basically boys and men were allowed to go to school and women were allowed to get a basic education, as well as slaves were not allowed to really get anything. Horace Mann believed in furthering everybody's education, and he was an advocate for pushing for better education for everybody, for men, women, and slaves. He didn't necessarily believe in slavery. To compare and contrast the role of the government in the Mann era to 2015, to compare, I found that he had a lot of visions that we have today as education, that as everybody is equal and deserves the opportunity to get the same type of education. He also believed no matter what religion you were, you could have the same opportunities as education. However, other religions didn't feel like it was okay for their students or kids to go to school with people of other religious beliefs, and they didn't want to have to pay for it, but they were trying to use it as like a taxation, so their monies would be provided to help pay for these educations. He was definitely a huge advocate for education. He became the Massachusetts State Board Secretary for Education, and he pushed for many things as school settings for all people, women, boys, men, and slaves. He was one of the first people to look into building safeties, facilities, safety, like what the kids were breathing, the good air, where the schools were located, what teaching methods the teachers were using, and what type of teachers they were actually supplying to teach this curriculum to the kids. I noticed in some of the reading I saw that a lot of the earlier on teachers were just teachers who were shoved in there because they would accept the lower paid salary, and a lot of them were almost illiterate that were teaching some of these kids. So he was looking into that to better that, to provide the best education possible. Also, he looked into what duties we should supply the teachers and the school board members, as well as administration that was overseeing these tasks take place. So that was with some of the things we have in common that back then with the government, I guess necessarily Mann taking charge of most of those areas. Some things that we have in difference to them, not always did the general population support Mann in his decisions or his feelings towards the freedom of education, because they didn't necessarily always feel that they should have to help pay for women or people moving up in the education world. Not only did people lose support for him, he was not voted into office and had to take a new position. And some of the things that I noticed back then for teaching-wise, they did allow women to teach. However, it was typically in the summer terms when most of the men were out working, and they would be teaching women. And then also noting that the men's salary were like 2.5 times more that of the women. And then once it started becoming more women wanted to teach, that they started allowing women to teach males in regular terms and like winter terms. But typically the reason why women started out in the school was to cover the terms that the men were working for in the fields over the summer. On page 67, I noticed that Mann believed punishment was the only alternative in order to save young delinquents from a life of immorality or crime. It basically said spanking them or beating them until they understood the right way was how they were going to learn to do their education and abide by rules and laws that were set for them. It was probably hard for him to get everybody to jump on his bandwagon trying to get the government and the general population of citizens to follow him and understand his beliefs in education, because everybody could get a job back then and earn some type of wage and didn't necessarily need an education. His visions were for everybody to become educated and provide more values and morals as a citizen to their country. Also, going back to comparing, I guess on page 60 it talked about how he did try to use the monies of the dollars from citizens to pay for common schools, and common schools were your typical like kids learning and what their abilities and the curriculum, like all the same kids, same level, were learning at the same thing, kind of what we are at typical public education is. Going on to teacher expectations, pros and cons. I found in the British Journal of Education of Psychology that high expectation teachers set out and provide more time for building framework for student learning. So they take more time building and developing their lessons, as well as understanding what their students' needs and abilities are. They also are able to provide their students more feedback from learning what they have provided in classwork. They also challenge their students with higher level questioning to get their thought process going more. Another large example of high expectation of teachers is that student behavior is monitored in a more positive manner and generally controlled, and typically don't have acting out in their class. Some cons. A lot of cons have been based on classroom demographics. It was also based on income levels of free and reduced lunch. Typically, students of African American nationality or even Hispanic race typically struggle, and some of the teachers already seem to know that or feel like that's already, I guess, a notch against them. Also, where these kids come from and their families, education may not be valued at home, so it is not preached at home the importance of getting your schoolwork done, or maybe they don't even have adult supervision when they get home. They may go to bed hungry or put themselves to bed and get themselves ready every morning, so them getting to school is just a plus in itself. A lot of these kids have more to worry about than just getting their scholastics done. They might worry about their safety, their siblings' safety, where a clean clothes or the next meal's coming from. So a lot of these kids aren't necessarily bought into the education program due to their interest because of their background from home or where they're located in the city or town that they're living in. So that plays a huge role on the abilities of students. Having teachers provide a strong education should not be based on their demographics or their income status, but however, sometimes some people judge a book by its cover and don't necessarily challenge those or try to find another way in to reach these kids. So I guess it's important that we take the opportunity to offer every one of these kids, whether they're high level learners or low level learners, to do our best to give them the education that they deserve and are offered. So I guess as an educator, you see kids who struggle and you hope to reach them and do your best at all times and giving them the same opportunity as any other kid in your classroom. Thanks.